first item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you'll join us, and if you'd remain standing at the conclusion of the pledge, appreciate it. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I just ask people to remain standing just for a moment in honor of Bruce Millian. This is our first meeting since he passed away, and when I first came into office, Bruce and I were sort of like this, and over time we were able to get through that and build a relationship. And in fact, one of the next thing on our agenda is sort of a tribute to Bruce, and I just wanted to recognize him and ask everybody to observe a moment of silence. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is the spotlight, and the first item is quite appropriate given the recognition we just gave to Bruce. And we'll turn this over to Ms. Keys.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our spotlight section of our agenda for Tuesday, September 22nd, 2015. Tonight, our spotlight will be on Fund for Teacher Fellows. And I want to thank Mr. Lyons for the tribute to Mr. Millian. I have to say the past couple weeks, maybe the past month or two, Bruce had come up to me pretty much on a weekly basis and said, Heidi, we've got to get these teachers in here. We have to spotlight them. And pretty much told me on a weekly basis, let's get this done. And unfortunately, he passed away. And I'd like to have this as a tribute to him. And I know he's looking up, or he's looking down on us. I should say we're looking up on him. And I think he would appreciate that. He always had a sense of humor, so I'm sure he would understand that. This summer, 8 Norwalk teachers representing 4 schools embarked on a self-designed learning odysseys as scholars, as well as researchers, adventurers, and Fund for Teacher Fellows. After pursuing scientific data, participating in seminars, volunteering with community organizations, as well as observing best practices. These teachers have returned to their classrooms to inspire all of their students and school communities with all of their experiences. The Norwalk Board of Education is proud to recognize the following Fund Teachers Fellows. And we have several names I wanted to mention. We have Andy Pierce, who's from Columbus Magnet, who will be participating in NASA Zero Gravity Workshop at Cape Canaveral to enhance current young astronaut curriculum and inspire a new generation of students to embrace STEM principles. I know firsthand 3 of my children have gone through the program, and it's a pretty amazing program. We also have another gentleman from Columbus, Smith Mallory, who trained with world-class athletes at the Triathlon School for Beginners in Hawaii. I was looking at this and thinking I would have loved to have gone to Hawaii, and perhaps Italy, but he was there to gain a better understanding. He had training, also to learn about healthy habits to combat childhood obesity, which is huge in the United States, and develop lifelong strategies for all of our elementary school students. We also have Joe LaPrade, Kelsey Murphy, and Susan Cotrella, all from Brian McMahon High School. They all studied in Columbia, methods of special ed and science instruction, as well as course progression, student-centered learning activities, inquiry-based learning. This was all to help better understand students in transition throughout the district. Diana Manusos, who's from Brian McMahon High School as well, attended Taft Educational Center's AP Art History workshop here in Connecticut in Watertown, followed by an independent study tour of masterpieces throughout Italy to teach a new course on the 250 works of art that all students need to know. Louis Sheed, who is from Norwalk High School, participated in a month-long NOLS wilderness course in the North Cascade Mountains in the Pacific Northwest. He was using new skills to establish a wilderness club that fosters students' perseverance, teamwork, as well as leadership. Missy Giandirko, who's from Wolfgood Elementary School, explored the Hawaiian Islands, cultural traditions, as well as incorporate findings into current studies of myths and folklore to develop vocabulary and story writing skills with mainstream special education students, as well as ELL students. All of us here on the board are pleased to report, following the successes of this year's program in Norwalk, the Fund for Teachers will expand this opportunity to include the entire state of Connecticut. And I know Bruce would be thrilled with that, with 100 rewards to be given for the summer of 2016. We're confident here that Norwalk teachers will be well represented. We want to congratulate all of them. We have some certificates here. I know some teachers unfortunately couldn't make it this evening. We will hold on to it and make sure it is sent to your school. But once I call your name, if you can come up, and we're just so used to the other room. I was going to say come around, but we're literally right here. But if you can come up and just come meet us, and I can give you your certificate. Her first person we have up is Missy Gianjurko.
Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Congratulations.
And Louis Sheed, if he's here tonight. Diana Manustos. Susan Quatrella. Kelsey Murphy. Joe LaPrade. Smith Mowry. Andy Pierce give this to Smith, since you both work in Columbus. Andy Pierce. They're all doing good. College, high school, middle school.
Space camps.
Oh yeah, I want to go there too. Thank you.
Round of applause for everyone. Thank you. And we also have some principals here as well. So any principals with Columbus, with Reggie from Norwalk High School. So great representation tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Keys. The next item on the agenda is presentation of Veneers Norwalk Maritime Aquarium Science and Engineering Program. I believe we have a representative from the aquarium.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Tammy Mokas, and I'm the Science and Health Instructional Specialist. Before we begin our presentation, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mayor Rilling, John Kites, and the Mayor's Energy and Environmental Task Force, and the Next Step Living in New England Smart Energy for their generous support of this past summer's program at the Norwalk Maritime Aquarium. Additionally, I'd like to thank the Board of Education for their support of the program, along with the middle school principals, Dr. Albert Sacchi, Dr. Moore, Mr. Belushi, and retired Principal Linda Sumter, along with their teachers designees, Dr. Fred Pierre-Louis, Dr. Thomas Stanford, Ms. Stephanie Tom, and Mr. Ryan Mitchell for their support and organization of our program that was held this past summer. This was an amazing opportunity for our students to be involved with the Norwalk Maritime Aquarium. But who can better describe that but yet the students themselves and the Norwalk Maritime Aquarium staff who's present here tonight. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Tom Naiman. I'm Director of Education at the Maritime Aquarium. And this program was a real joy to us, and I think really represents Norwalk at its best. It started with the Norwalk Energy Efficiency Challenge. And that was an effort to have Norwalk residents have a home energy assessment to reduce their energy costs and increase the efficiency, use less energy. John Kites who's sitting here, is the chair of the Energy and Environment Task Force. And he came up with the idea that for each of these home energy assessments, for which every resident would pay $99, $50 would be donated to a summer program that would benefit Norwalk students. And as a result of that, we had 48 students from Norwalk schools this summer for a week each, and none of them paid a dime. And it was such a pleasure for us. And I have to say that our staff raved about this group of kids more than any other group that we've had at least in the time that I've been there. The level of engagement was incredible. The students were so interested, they were so impressive. And that really is a tribute to Tammy Mokas, who led the recruitment effort, and to the principals and the science teachers at all of Norwalk schools, because they did an incredible job on a fairly tight schedule, recruiting kids who were just absolutely fantastic, incredibly impressive, and really got the most out of this experience that they possibly could have. So I want to add to Tammy's thanks, thank John Kites, thank Mayor Rilling for his support from the moment that this idea was raised, and most of all, thank Tammy and the science teachers at all of the middle schools for the job that you did in recruiting students for this fantastic program. I want to introduce our two staff who led the program, Bridget Cervero and Sarah Nahabedian, and they have a couple of special guests that they're going to introduce as well.
Good evening. Hi. So we just put together a quick PowerPoint to show really what we're able to do, because pictures speak 1,000 words. So you can see they didn't have any fun at all, right? With the question right there. So we're going to dive right in. There's a clicker behind you, or does that work? Okay. Yeah. So overall, like Tom said, we were able to provide this opportunity for 48 students, and we had a nice mix of all of the middle schools in Norwalk there. So it was a great interaction, so the kids got to meet friends or see students that they might not have seen in a while. So it was a lot of fun to see how they all interacted and watch them bond.
So we broke down the week into themes, so every day had a different topic or theme, and we really tried to highlight or showcase the variety of programs that we can offer at the Maritime Aquarium. So these are just a little snippet of activities and programs that we did, everything from meeting scuba divers and watching a dive show inside our biggest exhibit, to going on a boat ride on our new research vessel, the Spirit of the Sound. They did dissections, they went through new exhibits that we have, so we really jam-packed our week full of activities. This was from the Ecosystems Day, and we were fortunate to have Mayor Rilling visit us as well. So this was kind of a refresher for students on how to use microscopes, and we looked at some of the tiniest organisms of Long Island Sound and where they are in our food chains, really.
One special thing about the aquarium is being able to provide hands-on experience with live animals. That was something else we really tried to highlight. So during our animal care day, we had one of the aquarists bring in our bearded dragon. I think that was Sharky, maybe? And so they all got a chance to hold them and take pictures if they'd like, and learn about how to care for these animals that are common pets. Also, out on the RV Spirit of the Sound, we catch a lot of animals, and any animal that's safe for them to touch, we encourage. So here, this is a sea robin. It looks like a summer flounder there. So again, just lots of hands-on experience for them.
So the students worked on a project all week long, and we sort of prefaced this by them actually listening to sounds underwater. So a hydrophone is an underwater microphone, And we let the students listen to whale songs and dolphin clicks, what fish make underwater, and actually what the noises that humans make underwater as well. So the week-long project was building a hydrophone, and they learned all the tools to do that using simple materials around the house or the office. And they learned how to cut wires and strip wires and twist wires together and solder wires. And on the last day, on Friday, their families got to come in and actually use and test out those hydrophones that they spent all week building.
And again, during our navigation day, we were able to bring them all out onto the RV sphere of the sound. And on the sound, we do 3 samples. The first one is a plankton tow. We get to see what's at the surface. The next sample is called a Byod dredge, which is a big metal cage that we drag along the bottom to see what's in that benthic zone. And finally, we do an otter trawl, which is a large net that we'll deploy for about 20 minutes and see what's in that middle area swimming around. So the kids help with gear when it's appropriate and safe. And again, anything we catch, we give them a chance to touch, help find animals. Right here, they're digging through the mud in the Byod dredge. And this was also on navigation day. So while we're out on the water, we also pointed out all the buoys and the channel markers to and show charts so they get an idea of how a boat is navigated. And they also get their hands dirty. So best sign, hands dirty.
People pay a lot of money for that.
Yes, on their face.
On our animal care day, the students got to meet one of our aquarists at the aquarium, and they're talking, in this bottom photo right here, they're talking with Vicky, who's been an aquarist at the aquarium for almost as long as it's been open. And she was really telling them what it takes to be an aquarist, what it takes to take care of our animals, and then how to train them. And the top right photo is one of our seals coming out. They'll frequently bring seals out to either give them medications or to give them special treatments. So they got a sort of an up-close encounter with one of our seals.
And something else we were able to offer, unfortunately only to one of the groups because Mother Nature didn't cooperate the second week, but we bring them right to Cafcaster Beach here in Norwalk, and we explore, again, the various habitats and ecosystems. So they'll go out into the water and help us seine. You can see there's a net down at the bottom. We also walked out to the new fishing pier and got a chance to just see a different view and see some of the fishermen action, so it's a good day.
So we surveyed all 48 students and 20 parents got back to us. And as you can see, it was all positive feedback. These are just some of the quotes from students and parents that wrote in to us. This just shows, again, those same students and parents, and we broke this down into the different trips that we took, whether they're on our boat or at the beach, the level of enjoyment, and the staff. So out of 5,
We did okay.
we did pretty good.
Yeah. All right, so we'd like to take a moment to bring up a few of our students from the program too, so they can maybe share a few of their favorite things. So we have Ryan Helwig and Christian Miller. Come on.
Sure.
There you go.
So, my favorite part of the Maritime.
No, that's okay.
There you go.
So, my favorite part of the Maritime program was the research vessel. We went on a maritime boat and did a trolling session using a microscope and touching animals. And for my favorite part, when we were on it, we pulled up at least 20 flounder, which is my favorite fish. I also like feeding the horseshoe crabs, and we learned how they ate and what they ate.
Good. Thank you. Do we switch 41?
Nope.
Alright. I think that the program helped me get a better understanding of marine wildlife. I got to go behind the scenes, sadly no pictures. Learn about so many fish, some interesting. Went on the new and improved ship, which we caught many animals such as the sea robin and made many new friends. I'm glad my parents told me about this, not forcing me though, and hopefully many other students get this opportunity of a lifetime.
Thank you, guys. Yes, thank you. All right, so thank you guys. We're happy to share our feelings and questions. It was a great program. We loved it, I think, more than the kids. So, yeah.
Well, what are the odds of having this program again next summer?
100%.
Oh,
100%.
There you go. Question so much really hopefully. Terrific. It was a great experience.
Is the program, how many weeks is the program? I missed that.
It's 2 weeks. Yeah. 1 week with half the students, the other week the other.
Now, as successful as it is, are you looking maybe to expand it at some point, to open it up to more students possibly?
If possible. It relies on the resources of the aquarium, and of course how many people have the energy audit, and that's a very key component because, and Mr. Kites can tell you, and I just want to say for one moment, John took the chairmanship of my task force and ran with it with a passion. He's doing a remarkable job, and this was his idea, so thank you, John.
All right, well, thank you for your time. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Next item on the agenda is public comments. Mr. Kasimis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Public comment section, when I call your name, please come up to the table, have a seat. Please give us your name and address. You will have 3 minutes to address the board. And when you have 30 seconds left, I will wave my hand, and at that point we just ask that you begin to close. Please keep the comments civil, and we thank you for coming. First we have Ms. Lori Keegan.
Lori Keegan, 2 Barsham Road. Welcome to Norwalk, Mass. My name is Lori Keegan, and I'm here to speak to you about school bullying. The legislature of the state of Connecticut amended the Connecticut state statute that addressed school bullying with Public Act 11-232. Our state, Senate, and Congress recognized that the bullying laws needed to be addressed and strengthened, so they did. 2 years ago, I stood before you on this same topic. I was an employee of the Norwalk Public Schools for 8 years until I chose to leave in June to focus on my family. My heart now belongs to school volunteering and charity work. Please be reminded that Public Act 11-232, now state statute, requires that all school employees, including bus drivers, cafeteria staff, custodians, and aides, receive annual training on prevention, response, and reporting of school bullying. They must also be trained in suicide prevention. In my 8 years employed at Cranberry Elementary School, I was trained only once. And that was after I brought it to your attention. That was 2 years ago. This is Bart Pelosi. He was a 15-year-old student at Greenwich High School. Bart committed suicide 2 years ago because he was relentlessly bullied at school. He was bullied from the time he began middle school right up until the first day of his sophomore year at Greenwich High School. Even after many phone calls and notes to the school officials from his family, Bart's cries for help went unheard. If this state statute was complied with the Greenwich Public School System, Bart would have had a better chance and would not have been subjected to the cruel bullying that led to his suicide. The Greenwich Public Schools failed this young man. As a school employee and active mom in the school PTO, I take great pride in having placed the first buddy bench at Cranberry Elementary. We talked about kindness and friendship. So much more was accomplished, like Wear Blue Shirt Day, Buddy to Buddy, where a 5th grader is paired off with a kindergartner for the school year to share notes, greeting messages, and holiday wishes. We had a bully prevention enrichment program geared toward elementary school children. I provided all the material and guided student counsel on how to make posters for Bully Prevention Month, which is recognized in October. It is my mission and promise to the Pelosi family that I will continue to raise awareness in schools about bully prevention, all in memory of Bart Pelosi. I'm hoping you will recognize the importance of this subject and make it a Board of Education priority.
Thank you.
Okay. Can I address you just for one moment, if you don't mind? I would urge you to come. We're going to have an update by our Officer Bruce Morris at Human Resources. Our meeting will be, it was supposed to be today, and unfortunately he couldn't make it, and that's why we canceled our policy meeting, but it will be, I believe, on the 20th, and I urge you to attend that. I believe I might have sent you a message. I know that you had spoke about the bench, the buddy bench, which I think is a fabulous idea, and I know firsthand about the buddy bench. I've seen it in action, and I think a lot of times it's sponsored by PTO funds per school, but I would like to talk to you further about it. So you could certainly email me at Norwalk Public Schools, and I can talk to you about that further. But definitely come to our next policy meeting, and Bruce Morris will be there, and he will be addressing fully.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. This was all about the public act, though.
Yes, but I think you should come. I think if you can, it would be great to have you come.
And just to note, the buddy bench at Cranberry Elementary, that was all fundraising that I did.
Yes, and lots of I've seen it in fundraising by PTOs.
Yeah,
and I think it would
no
be,
PTO.
Okay,
This
just
was
by
all
fundraising.
fundraising.
Okay, maybe we can incorporate that in some of our schools. Okay.
If I may as well, I know Ms. Keegan is trying to put a walk together as well, suicide prevention walk, anti-bullying for the schools. So I think it's something that I know we all should get behind and help out.
Yeah, that started 2 years ago when Brian McMahon High School did the walk from, not Brian McMahon, but Sanford High School, and walked to Furnish High School. And it was take a stand against bullying. It was unbelievable. And I just thought that maybe our two high schools can do something like that. I think it would be tremendous.
Mike, you had a question? I was just going to say, your comments have not gone unnoticed. I had seen them on Monday, and actually I had sent an email to the superintendent and to the chair specifically asking, are we following state law? Are we doing this? Who is responsible for this in central office, and where do we stand? I never got an answer, but we tried.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Miss Mary Jordan.
Thank you. I am Mary Jordan, 6 Weatherbell Drive, Norwalk. I am the new president of the Norwalk Federation of Teachers, and I now represent almost 900 highly educated, hardworking professionals in 19 buildings who are dedicated to student achievement and excellence in teaching. I greet you as the new president with great sadness in the passing of Bruce Million, and also with great hope for the future. I have been proud to call myself a Norwalk Public Schools teacher. I have been just as proud to add the titles of union steward and union officer. Bruce was a friend and a mentor who gave me roles of responsibility, and he taught me to proceed with strength, sensitivity, and humor. I've served on numerous NFT committees, and also district committees, curriculum, safety, and others. In these roles, I've been helping to achieve our shared goal of excellent education for all Norwalk students. I would like to very much thank the board for the moment of silence, and the district generally for the expressions of sympathy that we have received, that the NFT and I personally have received during the past few weeks, especially Mayor Rilling, Mike Cicchetti, Mike Barbas, Heidi Pease, Mike Lyons, Dr. Adamowski, Dr. Gailuski, Artie Kasimis, and many others who have reached out from City Hall and Central Office with kindness, kind words to express sympathies coming to his services during the past few weeks. Bruce could strategize really far ahead, and he could have a wide perspective on a lot of different issues. He never lost sight of the here and the now and the people that were involved with him, and that was a really rare talent. He energetically promoted excellence and professionalism from the teachers in our schools, and that is his legacy, and it is one that I am committed to upholding. I really celebrate the collaboration and cooperation that Bruce began with the Norwalk Public Schools between Dr. Rivera and himself. And that continues today between Dr. Adamowski and myself and the board. That is made possible by strategic planning, by accurate financial reporting, and trust that is built very painstakingly. I embrace the challenges ahead for all of us, and of me as NFT president, as NFEP advisor, and I look forward very much to representing our teachers and our aides. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have Mr. Medard Thomas. Left. Okay, and that's it. No more signed up.
Very good. All right, we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Adamowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, since our last our last meeting, which was an abbreviated meeting, occurred on the first or second day of school, so I have not had an opportunity to talk with you at all about our opening, and I just wanted to make a few comments on this tonight. I think for the most part, and I think the experience of most people was that the opening was quiet, it was well organized, uneventful, as it should be, without drama or significant problems. And in many cases, you could go into classrooms and see and get the feeling that school had not let out for the summer, that this was the next day after the last day of school. I want to thank our teachers for the preparation they did to meet our students and provide an excellent return to school for them. If there was a problem in the opening, it was in the special ed area, where some of the individual student aides were not present when students arrived. That will not happen again. It is another one of those areas that we have to address in the organization and structure of our special education department, and particularly the work that needs to be done during the summer and not the school year in preparation for school. If I have a concern regarding any of our schools, it is the Jefferson School. We have hit an enrollment of 630 students at Jefferson in a school that was originally designed for 400. And we are coping with that, or the school is coping with that, by having behind the school a modular building. This is not a set of modular classrooms. It's actually a modular building that has 10 classrooms and 4 bathrooms in it. The modular building is actually in far better shape than the original school building in front of it. And then this year, another 2 modular classrooms were added behind the modular building to accommodate an increase in 5th grade students. This number of students far exceeds the capacity of the site to manage this well. And some of you that are familiar with Jefferson know that the state has closed the road at school opening and school dismissal. It's a very difficult situation to manage given the number of students and parents, buses, cars, and everything else that is present there. I'm going to be talking with you later in the evening about additional support that we can provide to the school. And so we have both a short and long-term situation and set of goals here. The short term is to provide additional support to the school to make this a workable situation and a good educational situation for the children of Jefferson. The long-term situation involves our facilities study and our facilities master plan, and what is the long-term plan for using the school or creating an alternative or providing additional choice for the families in that area. I should also point out that Jefferson last year was selected as a U.S. State Department of Education, a United States Department of Education Blue Ribbon School. So there is a great reluctance on the part of parents to go anywhere else. I think one of the reasons why the school is at 630 students is that no parents are leaving there. They are not applying for out-of-district transfers. They are not seeking other alternatives. And so we have this dynamic of a good academic school in a facility that cannot support it at the current time. And I'm raising this issue tonight. It's the first of comments I will be making regarding the sense of urgency that we have to have for the families and children at Jefferson School. I also want to commend a couple of people in particular for the opening. One is Bill Hodell, our Director of Facilities, as well as his hardworking custodians and maintenance workers. I think at some point it was round the clock and weekend work in order to ensure that every project was finished and ready to go, including the addition at Rowayton and the 2 new classrooms at Jefferson. I also want to thank Joanna Van Vitor, our transportation coordinator, for yeoman's work, and again, many, many long hours to manage the extent of busing that we do in this city, with one individual working with contractors to do this. All in all, a very good opening, but areas identified for improvement in the future, and needs that have certainly been underlined by this year's opening. Next item in my report, the Parents for Literacy program, is also, picking up on the theme that this meeting began on, is also an appropriate tribute to the legacy of Bruce Mellion, in that this program was started by him at his urging, at his organization. And it was a controversial program in some respects, based upon the comments of those in the community and different opinions that were held on this. And the board had asked me to look into it and to see how it could be organized, or how it should be organized, if it was to be organized, for the next school year. I've given the board a sheet that summarizes the aspects of this that we will be following going forward. It's important to point out that there are a number of Parents as First Teachers programs in other districts in our country, and some states actually have statewide Parents as Teachers program. So this is not as new an idea as some might represent, but it was certainly new for Norwalk, and if there was a unique aspect of it, it was that the impetus for it came from the leadership of our teachers union, for which I think we should be grateful. The program this year will be designed to assist and support preschool and kindergarten parents in all 6 Norwalk Title I schools. You will note that last year, one of the concerns regarding this program is that it served the parents in only one school, the Brookside School. This is a Title I funded program. It needs to serve all 6 Title I schools as part of Title I services. We will staff it by 1 FTE, adult education teacher, which is the designation that the state wants us to use for this, or 2.5 teachers. If it's 2.5 teachers, it would be 3 schools each. There has also, there was also criticism, and I think appropriate criticism, that the program was not connected to anything. Should it be connected to the literacy curriculum, for example? Well, this is not a curriculum. This is not a curriculum. It's training for parents. It's an attempt to get parents to exhibit certain behaviors and do certain things with their students. The appropriate place of connection is our early literacy program, our preschools. Right? So the teachers would be supervised by Pamela Jefferson, who is here tonight, our early childhood specialist. That will ensure accountability for time and what is carried out. And the program will also be aligned to preschool outcomes and kindergarten readiness. Now, we have criteria for this in the preschool, and then as measured in kindergarten, its performance on the PELI, the PLI, which is the assessment for kindergarten readiness. This is the same assessment that Norwalkl is using to identify what they refer to as red zone kindergarten students, or the students that need the most intervention. In other words, does this program have an effect on reducing the number of students that would require that amount of intervention coming to school? And in kindergarten by DIBELS, which I think the board is aware of, which is our measure of reading readiness. We're going to fund this with $150,000 of Title I carryover funds, and this will pay for the teachers, for the materials, for the things that we would need for the parent meetings and so on. And if it's successful, the carryover funds are funds that were not expended in the last school year, by the way, in our Title I grant. That hopefully will not happen again, because we should be expending all those Title I funds for Title I students, right? But anyway, it provides an opportunity for us this year to do something of a pilot nature. And if the program can be proven to be successful, potential future funding can come from the Title I parent involvement set aside, which actually requires us to spend 10% of Title I, our entire Title I grant, on parent involvement activities. We are going to have an annual evaluation of the program at the end of the year. That's going to be based on 3 factors, or 3 data sources. One is parent participation, simply the number of parents who can be touched by this. And in order to touch a sufficient number of parents, this is going to have to take a differentiated form over last year. Not only large group activities and large group training sessions, but small group training sessions, some of which would occur right in the preschool classrooms, and home visits, which will focus in on individual parent needs and instructions in the home. And again, this is a model similar to what you will see in Parents as First Teachers programs and other places. There will also be a parent rating of program value and use that will help rate the program. And then the quantitative portion of this will be a measurement of positive effects on kindergarten readiness as measured by the PELI, and first grade readiness as measured by the DIBELS. And in this case, our assessment and evaluation specialists will be designing what is called a matched pair study, which can analyze the difference in effect on similar children, matched pairs of children, some of whom have had this program and others who have not. So I'm hoping that this organization and the thoughtfulness that has gone into this on the part of everyone involved will provide a good service to parents. It will also help us evaluate the efficacy of doing this. And again, I'm grateful to Mr. Mellion and all those who came forward with this idea, maybe not in its perfect form to start with, but something that was compelling and important to do, and deserves to be developed further. And I would just ask the board if they have any questions regarding the bullet points that I've shared with you. Any questions?
I think this looks great. It really does. It's comprehensive, and a lot of thought and effort put into this. But one question I have is, as far as the annual evaluation, I realized whether the 2.5 teachers or one adult education teacher will be supervised by Pamela Jefferson, but as far as the evaluation, will they fall under the evaluation process?
yearly
For them to be evaluated?
The teachers will be supervised
Okay.
by Ms. Jefferson, okay? These are folks that will, unless it is one full-time, if it is
Right.
one full-time person, they will be subject to the seat evaluation process with Ms. Jefferson. If it's 2.5 people, they will have that in the school where they're teaching, and then they'll simply have supervision here. The evaluation, is really a program evaluation. It's
Yeah,
the
it's not a
program.
teacher
I
evaluation.
understand that,
Right,
I
it's
just,
program
it's a big part
producing.
of this.
But they will, by law, be evaluated by someone at some point, personally as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you.
How will the program be developed? Is it kind of an extension of what was being done before, or is it more kind of like when you were talking about some of the other places that have been doing this that were not the first? Will it kind of?
I think it will be an expansion of what was being done before. My understanding is that it was limited primarily to large group sessions. Okay, and I think while we will have some of those in the future, it will also be important to have sessions at each school, as I said, some in the preschool classrooms where we have a captive audience quite often of parents bringing their children to school, and then home visits as well. And the home visits will be new. So it's the combination of those three things I would characterize as an expansion.
Great, thank you.
Another question.
Steve?
Stephen, how will this be rolled out? I realize it's all 6 Norwalk Title I schools. Is it done in increments? Is it done all at the same time? How will this take effect?
Three schools per person, or
Okay.
if we have one full-time person, it will be all 6 schools, and it will require the teacher or teachers to have relationships in each school and be present there on a regular basis, and be organizing the protocol relative to the parent meetings, materials, training, all of that. I mean, I think if this is successful, we would be successful in making it a part of the preschool program and preschool experience.
Thank you.
Anything else? It's good.
Okay, last part of my report deals with elementary, K-8 in this case, elementary and middle school achievement data. And the board will recall that at your August meeting, we had a presentation and discussion on high school achievement data and attainment data, grades 9 through 12. Tonight we're going to cover K through 8, and at your October meeting, we're going to cover district-wide attainment and achievement comparatively. And this is all to queue up, so you won't be seeing this data for the first time at our retreat in November, where we are going to revisit the strategic operating plan, revise it, improve it, hopefully make it more robust. But this is the latest data that we need to use to drive it and to make those decisions. So we're going to cover 3 areas briefly tonight. One is the SPAC data. This is our smarter, balanced state assessments that measure the Common Core. And this is our high-stakes state test. We have the first, beyond the pilot, the first broad-scale administration of this in the last school year, last March. That's the data that you're going to be seeing. Now, we do not have an individual growth comparison. We won't have that till next year when we can compare it to this year's data. But we do have comparative data. We can see what schools did better on average than others. We can see how we did relative to other districts and the state. And it also helps show us, what our highest areas were, perhaps the areas of greatest concern. I'm also going to review very quickly the DIBELS data that we have that is used to measure early literacy in K through 3. And then finally, the Cmt Science Assessment, which is the last aspect of the old CMT that is still given in grades 5 and 8. And we will continue to give that until an assessment is developed for the next generation science standards, which the state is currently working on. So let's talk about smarter balance for a minute. And the board members have this these slides in front of them. They're on the screen for the benefit of our guests who are here tonight. We tested approximately 5,600 students in Norwalk last March in grades 3 through 8 and also 11. I'm going to be reporting specific data on grades 3 through 8 tonight on the SBAC. But I thought it would be interesting for you to see in the green box, student diversity. 18% of the test takers were African American, 5% Asian, 44% Hispanic, which constitute the largest minority group in our school district today, and 32% white. Among the special populations, 14% of test takers were English language learners, 11% were in special ed, 49%, or half of our district, is eligible for free and reduced lunch, which is the proxy for having a lower income family. And then 55% are high needs. Now, high needs is probably a term you're not familiar with because this is new. This is the first time our state has used it. But in the accountability plan that the state is publishing later this year, the high needs students are going to play a very prominent role. To be high needs, you have to be in one or more of these categories. So in other words, English language learners, special ed, free and reduced lunch, you have to be in one or more of the categories to be a high needs student. And our ranking as a school district, our success as a school district, is going to be determined not only by our relative score or improvement on the SPAC, but how our high needs students are doing, and it will be very heavily rated or weighted in terms of our state rating. And then you'll notice that we have more boys than girls for some reason, 51%, 49%. So if you take a look at our SPAC results in the broadest sense, we can compare them to the state. The SPAC is set up in 4 levels. Level 1 is very, very low. These are the highest need students, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Level 2, level 3, and 4 are the most important because those are the levels that are, 4 is the very highest, but it's viewed that you're meeting the standard and you're on grade level performance if you're, for those students that are scoring at 3 or 4. Now, please remember that it was anticipated that throughout the state, these scores would be initially relatively low when compared to the old CMT and CAP scores. For 2 reasons. One, it's a new test, new things are being tested. But secondly, it's at a much higher level of rigor than our CMT was to measure our state standards. So you can see that for English language arts, our district had 47% of students at levels 3 and 4, the state at 55%. So we have an external gap there of about 7%. And in math, everyone did worse throughout the state and in Norwalk, and our gap is larger there at 9% of student performance. The next slide shows you our results by grade in school. Grades 3 through 5 in our elementary schools, and grades 6, 7, and 8 in our middle schools. And again, the only value this has is to look at comparison and where the greatest need is in our system of schools. So for example, among our elementary schools, Kendall had the lowest number of students reaching level 3 and 4. Rowayton had the highest number of students. That was true in English language arts. You'll see the different placement of the other schools as well as the state, and you see we have a difference there of almost 5% between our performance and average state performance. At the middle schools, Rowton's scoring the highest, West Rock's the lowest, and about a 7% difference between state attainment and our attainment. One of the other things that this chart tells us, if you look at it carefully, is that as students advance grades in our school system, the external achievement gap between our schools and the state increases. Okay? And that's an instructional issue that we have to deal with as a district. This is the essence of the preparation gap at school entry, turning into an achievement gap the more schooling a child has. And so our ability to intervene at key points in this is going to be critical to our diminishing both the external gap that we have with the state and our internal achievement gap.
Would that be expected? You know, if your performance is below average, that spread is going to get wider over time? Wouldn't that
yes.
be
So the best evidence we have of this is the NAEP. We've had the NAEP for the last 10 years. It's a sampled national test given in 4th and 8th grade only. If you go to the website for the National Center for Education Statistics, you can click on the NAEP and you can see Connecticut scores and every state scores at 4th and 8th grade. And you will notice that in almost every instance, the gap is greater at 8th grade than it was at 4th grade. And once a gap starts to develop as a result of a preparation gap not being fully addressed, it tends to get wider with every year of schooling. And again, this is not an issue unique to Norwalk. It's a national issue, but it's certainly one that has to be able to guide our intervention efforts if we want to defeat it. Next slide is our Smarter Balanced results by grade. And we talk about the gap growing bigger. This is ever more so in math. Relatively speaking, our math scores in Norwalk and the state are lower than ELA. One of the obvious implications that this has for us at the current time is the amount of time we are spending in math instruction. In our elementary schools, for example, we have about a 2-hour block, about 2 hours a day that we're spending on literacy. Only spending an hour on math. The mean in the state is a 90-minute block. And so we are unusual in that respect, and that's something I'm hoping we can address this year, because I think it's predictable that we would do we would score significantly lower in math than ELA, just given the amount of limited time we're spending on it.
Stephen, is there any, I don't know if you're a statistician or not, but when you look at the math numbers, the English numbers are somewhat consistent, but if you look at the math numbers, you've got like Fox Run goes from 50% one year, 22% by grade 5, and then you've got Cranberry very strong in 3rd grade and then drops to 5th grade. Is that just as we were introducing new curriculum at different times, or?
I think that is just simply representative of the level of preparation for the test of the various cohorts at each grade level.
Okay.
Some are better prepared, some had a better aligned curriculum the year before. Mm-hmm. So in some respects, it's a indicator of district preparation for the Common Core. In other respects, it's due to the individual variation in cohorts and what their past experience had been. Remember, for a 5th grader, almost their entire past experience had been in the old state standards and the CMT, this is very different. Next slide are our subgroup results across grades. And you remember when we looked at data from the high school, some of the subgroup performance were things that we were most concerned about. There's 2 charts here basically, the ELA percent at levels 3 and 4 and math at percentage levels 3 and 4, and it's disaggregated by race and ethnicity subgroups. And so you'll notice that blacks and African Americans are down by about 2%, Latinos are up by about 2%. We have very few students of 2 or more races, so that's probably not enough of an end to have any validity. but white students are down 1.6% relative to the state in English language arts and 3.6% in math. Now, I'm pointing this out because the gap can be interpreted in several ways. In this case, the gap is narrowing because white students did less well on the test and as a group. And so, again, we have to be aware of this, and we have to have interventions or basic core programs that speak to the needs of all students relative to the Common Core. The free lunch eligible students data is not yet available from the state, so we don't have that to report, but that would be the other subgroup. Now here's our high needs subgroup that I referenced earlier tonight. And in this chart, this chart strikes a very hopeful note because in the majority of cases here, Norwalk has kept up or exceeded the state. In other words, the performance of our highest need students. In most cases, everywhere that you see an asterisk is actually above the state level of attainment when compared to high need students in the state in general. So this is a validation of some of the intervention work that has been done in our schools. I mean, all of this tells us how far we have to go, but this is certainly a hopeful and encouraging sign. Very next slide compares us to the other districts in our district reference group in ELA. Our district reference group, which is DRGH, according to the state, are districts that are similar to us in terms of income and student characteristics. So you'll see we're tied for second place with Danbury on this list, Stanford being the highest, the other districts in our DRG being below us. So again, relative performance that is certainly respectable when compared to similar districts. We have the same comparison in math, and we're exactly in the same place. Behind Stanford, above, tied with Danbury, and above the other districts in the DRG. Okay, before I go on to the dibbles, let me just ask the board if you have any questions on what we've covered with the SPAC results.
This can be for another time, but I'm just really curious about the intervention plans. Like when students are diagnosed, like do we have like software or something that's, diagnosing the students and then letting the teachers know exactly what the students need?
Yeah, so this is probably the greatest need we have in our district currently, and that's the need for what educators will refer to and use the acronym SRBI, scientifically research-based interventions. And they generally take the form of what are called Tier 2 interventions, which are classroom interventions that a classroom teacher is trained in and has available to them, and Tier 3 interventions for a smaller group of students. And these are generally more significant interventions that require additional time, tutoring, one-on-one, small group assistance, and that type of thing. That's the greatest need in our district right now. You may recall when you approved the literacy plan that Superintendent Rivera presented to you last year. There was a phase 1 and a phase 2. The phase 1 was the Tier 1 program, the Journeys program and the supplemental material. Phase 2 and 3, which was to occur this year, was the Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. Now, later in this meeting, you're going to be reviewing our Alliance grant proposal, which we cannot change at this point without laying people off, but which we have to change for the future. Because the 30 Alliance districts use the Alliance funding, the several $1 million of Alliance funding, to provide these Tier 2 and 3 interventions. You'll see that our money is tied up in other things, right? like financing all of Briggs. And so our key to this is to be able to provide equity funding for all of our schools, which will free up our special funds to use across our schools on Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. I think there's a great awareness of this on the part of our staff. I've been very encouraged as I visit school to hear teachers and principals express concern about this, that they want to do more in this area. They need training, they need materials, they need support, and in some cases we need to be able to extend time and have specialized staff available to work with groups of students. So we know what to do. We just have to figure out what to do it, how to do it. We know what to do.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, this the DIBELS is our assessment. This is part of the M-class assessment, in which the district was a pilot, but it's the way we assess these DIBELS as dynamic indicators of basic early literacy. It's how we assess early literacy in grades in the primary grades K through 3. You'll notice that last year was the first year that every Norwalk school gave this, okay? And it's given in the beginning of the year and the end of the year. So it's designed to track student growth. And you'll see that some of the growth was very, very encouraging. We have schools like Kendall and Tracy that had phenomenal growth, very unusual in terms of this particular assessment. And I think I think it can be said that our staff did a very good job all around on this. Now, this is not a comprehensive assessment like the SBAC. The DIBELS simply measures a couple of things like phonemic awareness and word attack skills and vocabulary. But nonetheless, it is an excellent measure of early literacy progress. If you look at your next slide, these are the students, however, on the DIBELS that are reading at the well below benchmark level. That was the lowest level of the DIBELS. And you'll see on this chart, every school is listed. The number of students who are reading well below the benchmark is also listed. And then, interestingly, we have the percent that those of the school that those students represent, and the percent that those students represent in the district as a whole. This is a very revealing piece of data because it shows us exactly where intervention is needed or where it's needed the most. If you look at this, you could conclude that almost 40% of low achievement in the district can be addressed by intervening in 3 schools. And if you add the 4th school, you would get 50% by including Kendall. So in 5 schools, 50% of the intervention need. This is important information because it shows us where we have to intervene, where we have to spend more time, more money, more ideas, more robust curriculum and support for students. This is how we can close the gap. It's almost a roadmap for us. Where do you work to close the gap? This is where you work. 50% of the lowest performing students in 5 schools. And so we have a differentiated responsibility. When we come to our retreat in November, we're going to be talking about a theory of action that would enable us to differentiate our relationship with each school, to give greater autonomy to those schools that are doing well or growing, improving, and to be able to intervene in those schools that require additional district intervention and support. I'm going to conclude with the Cmt Science. This is a fairly good chart for us. The Cmt is only given in the 5th and 8th grade, as it was during CMT days. There is a very small external gap with the state, but the smallest when compared to the SBAC areas, 3 to 4 points. And here the gap does not increase in middle school. And we think the reason for that is that there, in the structure of middle school, there is daily science instruction in our teams. And so our middle school students have far more time in instruction in science than our 5th grade students. We think that's the reason. Okay. So that concludes the elementary report. Let me ask you again if you have any questions on the data you've seen. I know a number of board members have been anxious to see the SPAC results. We'll have more detail on the SPAC at the retreat, but this will give you kind of a broad stroke of where we stand.
Mike? Dr. Mansky, what's your take on this? You know, you kind of were very clinical and objective with the data. Are you surprised with where we are? Are you surprised by the disparities between schools? What's your kind of professional review, opinion on where we are?
I have been fully aware of there are 3 types of internal of achievement gaps. Right? One is internal. You have an internal gap when you're at or above the state level of performance, but there is a difference between groups of students by race, ethnicity, and income. Okay, so I was aware of our internal gap. You have an external gap when you have areas of performance where, on average, you are not at the level of the state average or above. And then the third gap is a combination gap, where you have both a external and internal achievement gap. Okay, I think this data tells us that we have the latter, that we have a combination gap, that there are things that we need to do to raise the overall level of attainment to the state average, but that within that we have a specific challenge with certain groups in our school system and certain schools where we tend to have more students who have these needs. So I think this is going to require a more comprehensive approach. That approach has to be reflected in our strategic operating plan. And I think if there's any surprise here or learning here, not so much a surprise, is that we're going to have to be at a higher level of sophistication on this than perhaps you may have thought a year ago.
How prepared are we to aggressively attack the high needs interventions?
Well, right now, we're not prepared at all. However, my sense is that by the end of this year, going into the next school year, we will be far ahead of where we are now. As I said, there's a recognition of this in every school. We have CERC visiting our schools to document the degree of Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions. Now you can say, okay, they're studying what we already know, that we're not doing it, right? But also this has been a very good way to raise consciousness. And again, I think the most encouraging aspect of this is not a change that you have to force people to make. Our teachers want this. They want the support. They want the training. They want the Tier 2 programs. And so we have a group of staff that can embrace this, and because they're embracing it, they will do it well. And so I've talked with Dr. Connor and our curriculum coordinators on this. We've set some short-term goals for this in terms of the low-hanging fruit and what can be accomplished this year. If you'd like, at your next meeting, I can have you report on that. And then we have a set of more significant goals that require money, that require changing our staffing patterns somewhat, that would go into effect for the next school year. And I think that concludes my report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adamowski. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the consent calendar. The next
personnel, list that's in the packet. Approve of the authorized signature change form on child nutrition program, in recognition of Hispanic Heritage Month. Chair would also suggest that we add item 6.3 to consent to table the developmental assets student survey by Norwalk Acts. Norwalk Acts is re-looking at that survey right now, so they've asked for some additional time to study that. So those would be the 4 items on the consent calendar: 6.1 A, B, C, and 6.3. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar? Mr. Sims moves. Mr. Barba seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All in favor, please indicate. And it is unanimously approved. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approval of contract between Superintendent Dr. Stephen Adamowski and the Norwalk Board of Education. I sent the contract out to the board over the weekend. The contract essentially implements the temporary agreement that we had entered into with Dr. Adamowski back in the summer, and fills it in with provisions largely similar to those that we had with Dr. Rivera. I will explain a couple of points about the contract. Is there a motion to approve the contract? Ms. Murray moves. Is there a second? Ms. Key seconds. I just want to point out that the one significant difference between this contract and the prior agreement is that there are 2 provisions in here for what in the corporate world is called golden handcuffs. As Dr. Adamowski knows, this has absolutely nothing personal to do with him. This is something that the board had agreed that we were going to do before we even knew that you were interested in the job. What it does is the contract provides that $45,000 from the annuity payments that would be due to Dr. Adamowski would be withheld and would only become payable if he served the entire 3 years of the contract, as well as 25% of any incentive compensation that the board decides to allow. Again, I have no doubt that Dr. Adamowski is going to stay for the term. That's been his history of all the other positions that he's held. And if you do, then this doesn't concern you at all, because at the end of the day, you'll get the same amount of money. But it does provide an incentive for any superintendent to fill out the full term, which, as everybody knows, is something we've had a slight problem with. That's the major difference. Everything else is pretty much matched up to what was in Dr. Rivera's contract. This contract was reviewed, of course, by Mr. Mooney, our outside counsel, and approved it. I'm obviously very happy to have this on the agenda. I think Dr. Adamowski has already, in a very short period of time, made a lot of progress in addressing some really serious issues that we've had here. I think that the retreat in November is going to be very interesting. Hopefully I'll be around to participate in it, but even if I'm not, those of you who will be, I think are going to find it fascinating. Is there any other discussion on the motion? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, if hearing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All in favor of approving the contract, please indicate. And it is unanimous. Thank you. I also wanted to note, just in passing, that Ms. Mosby had emailed earlier that she would not be able to attend because she has a medical problem, nothing serious, but just to keep her away from the meeting. But she did indicate in the email that if she was here, she was going to vote yes in favor of Dr. Adamowski's contract. All right. Next item on the agenda is number 6.4, approval of Family Resource Center program grants for Fox Run School in Naramake. You want to give us a brief summary on this one?
Oh, I think it's fairly self-explanatory. We've had one Family Resource Center. We now have state funding for 3. This is an established model providing service delivery to students in that school, and we're grateful to be able to do this.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the application? Mr. Sims moves. Is there a second? Ms. Murray seconds. Any further discussion? Keys.
I think I definitely have my approval for this. I think it has this program offers great training. It's an early childhood program, provides training for daycare providers, working closely with parents. They have group meetings, workshops. They work with typical and atypical children. They have screening. I think any of our family resource centers are really a viable part of our community. So I wholeheartedly approve this grant.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please indicate. It is unanimous, thank you. Next, item 5 is approval of 2015 Consolidated Alliance and Priority School District application. I think you may want to address this a little bit.
I do, and you know, I appreciate the board's consideration and focus on this tonight. I think this is an area that you will certainly feel that you need to be perhaps more involved in than you have been in the past. We are an alliance district. We are one of the 30 alliance districts in the state. 30 are the most neediest districts in the state. And our omnibus reform legislation of 2012 created a very significant funding stream. I think there was so much discouragement with the ECS formula that the governor felt that the best way to provide aid to the districts that needed it the most was through the Alliance grant. So we received several million a year. This is the combination of the Alliance and the old Priority School District grant. And in it, there is a legislative mandate that these funds be used for exactly what we were talking about a few minutes ago. That they be used for reading and math interventions, that they be used for additional time in instruction, and also for talent. The definition of talent there is professional development and training of teachers to do these things. Our grant, in its current form, tests the limits of the letter of the law and may miss some of the intent, all right? And I think it may be a product of some of the past budget cuts where things were shifted from the general budget to special funds. So this is not something we can do anything about this year without laying people off. So I'm not recommending any changes in that. This grant, it does require board approval. This is a state requirement after the State Department approves it. Right? And that's where we are. In looking back through your minutes last year, it doesn't look to me as like you approved it. At least I cannot find a record of your approving this grant. So this may be the first time you're seeing it.
I will say, I mean, I read through this whole thing. I was kind of shocked at some of the stuff that's in here, and we've never. I'm sure I've never seen this before. Just so I don't think we ever will. Yeah.
So this is one of our biggest levers in the objectives and goals of the strategic operating plan, and we need to be able to use it as such. Not doing that ties our hands behind our back, and we can talk all we want about the interventions that students need. You don't provide it unless you invest in it, and this is the vehicle in the 30 alliance districts for doing that. So I'd like to just reference some things here, and the focus will be on probably what has to change in order for us to be able to use this as a lever for intervention. Now, to drive us all crazy, these state forms are not numbered, but if you go to the 4th page in, you will see several expenditures there for elementary curriculum and instruction site directors, right? So there's one for Briggs, and then there's 8, or there's 7 for the elementary schools and 1 for 8, and 1 for Briggs, for a total of 8. We actually have 9, and you'll recall from previous report I gave you that we added 1, eliminated another position to cover that, to get to the current configuration of the curriculum and instruction site directors. This is an appropriate use of Alliance funds, by the way, okay? Because this creates an instruction capacity for intervention that would not exist without this. So this is one of the few expenditures in this grant that I could actually endorse and hopefully would continue in the future. If you go to keep counting and go to the 8th page, we have a little different story. We're using this money to fund our early childhood director, which probably should be a local funding responsibility. Probably the most unusual expenditure, and I was familiar with these grants through my state role for the districts that were under state supervision, and I had a hand in crafting them. And as a result of that, one year I was on a review panel that reviewed all 30. We have an expenditure here for a percentage. It's approximately 20% of the salaries of 48 kindergarten, first, second, and third grade teachers. Again, highly, highly unusual, and certainly a district responsibility. We have a responsibility to fund every child in the school district with a teacher, including kindergarten, including first grade, including second grade. And I'm not sure where this came from, but apparently it's been, for the life of the grant, which is 3 years now, it's been an item in the grant. The first grade aides are an acceptable expenditure. That's the next line down, because presumably they're providing extra help and intervention and so on. The next item is also not a good expenditure. There are 6 middle school English teachers, ELA, English Language Arts teachers. I assume this is there because in the middle schools we have a double block of English Language Arts. And that the idea was to fund the difference between what would have been a regular period and the larger, and the 6 is cumulative for the district. But again, it could be argued that that is a district responsibility. We don't fund double blocks anywhere else with state funds. So if you go to page 9, which is the next page, you'll see the contract with CERC to document where we are on SRBI. We have a world languages contract that was already underway at this time, and we will probably cancel the one with CREC for the social studies alignment, which is not a compelling issue for us at this time. And then if you keep counting forward and go to the 12th page, you have an expenditure of $600,000 for all the security guards in the district. These are the middle and high school security guards. And that is a legitimate expenditure under state rules. It's security guards are one of the climate issues that the state has identified. However, to fund all of them, I think the intent of the legislation is you might fund some over what you had, right, to create additional or an additionally secure environment. I'm not sure it was ever intended that you'd use these funds to fund all of them with no local contribution. And then probably the most difficult expenditure of all, the one that I would recommend we focus on in the next budget, is the next line, where we're spending $675,000 to fund every staff member at Briggs, including the principal. And from an equity standpoint, we need to be able to support Briggs in the same way we support our other 2 high schools. We cannot have a school that exists solely on special funds and grants. We have an equity responsibility here. So, one solution is to simply come up with $675,000 more. But a better solution is to allow money to follow the child, so that when a student leaves Brian McMahon or Norwalk High School, their funds go with them. Right now, we're paying for them twice because they've already been funded at their home high school, and now they're being funded again on special funds. But the funding from special funds prevents us from meeting the needs of a large group of other students. So I would ask that you be attuned to that issue as we start putting the budget together and consider the budget for the next school year. But if there is anything that would need to change in this for the next school year, it would be the issue of funding Briggs exclusively with special funds. It may be that Briggs will need something extra, and then we will use special funds for some of that. But we need a foundational funding level at Briggs, as we do at every other school. So those are the highlights of this. And as Mr. Barbas said, I read it and I was shocked. I had the same reaction when I reviewed it for the first time. But again, it's another piece of information and data, and for a policy board, it provides a direction around what we're going to do differently.
Okay. All right. The chair would entertain a motion to approve the application. Mr. Barbas moves, Ms. Keys seconds. Any further discussion? All right, all in favor of approving the grant, please indicate. And it is unanimous, thank you. Okay, approval of FY 2014-15 reserve for encumbrance in the amount of $478,137. I think we can take this up jointly with approval to place unexpended balance of $573,607 in a non-lapsing account. Would you like to make your first report, new financial director?
Sure, happy to. Although I'm not actually the finance director here, you're the CFO yet, but happy to fill in.
De facto.
Yes, so welcome to be here. Glad to be here for the first time reporting before you. The two items that the chair just referenced relate to a return of surplus funds from last year's operating budget. Provided you with a report by object detail indicating that the board ended last fiscal year in the general fund with total expenditures of $167,355,000 compared to an approved budget of $168,407,000. Therefore, the board, in essence, had $1,051,000 left at the end of the year. Now, we broke these into two items, two requests, because the first three are what we refer to as reserve for encumbrances. These are, in fact, obligations that were due and payable as of June 30th, but they had not yet been paid. So the first item represents an outstanding purchase order to Silver Petrocelli, who is doing a facilities utilization review. That study is ongoing, and the obligation, will certainly be fully expended. So that's $160,930. There's also $18,600 on a smaller school security evaluation, again, outstanding purchase order in that case. And then the third item is employee severance payments under the applicable collective bargaining agreements. Employees are allowed to defer severance payments on retirement until the following January. So the $298,607 represents that amount that those former employees have elected to defer, but in fact is due and payable as of the end of June. So those amounts total to $478,137, which again are reserved for encumbrance items. These will then go to the Board of Estimate and Taxation at their next meeting for final approval. The second set of items is the true surplus, if you will, that's available from the prior fiscal year of $573,607, and the state permitted beginning back in 2011 for boards of education to request that up to 1% of any surplus funds in their operating budget be put into a non-lapsing account for use by the Board of Education. And the Board of Education has in fact requested that funds be placed in that non-lapsing account for each of the last several years since 2011, and the Board of Estimate has approved those requests. This amount, $573,000, is well below the 1% cap, so we are requesting that the board request that the full amount be put into that non-lapsing account. The specific use of those funds would come back to this board at a subsequent meeting, hopefully in October, where we would recommend on how those funds would be allocated. We do know a couple of things. There was in fact a plan that had been developed by my predecessor, but I wanted an opportunity to review it myself and obviously review it with the superintendent. So, but there are some capital items. Earlier there was discussion about the placement of portables at Jefferson School, and so that, for instance, was a capital item that was not included in the budget that needs to be covered somehow. So certainly, this is one potential way to cover that. And there are some other capital items that are also more or less required. And then secondarily, we know that the area of special education, contracted services, as well as out-of-district tuition are areas that there's some concern over, and whether the budgets there are adequate, so that that may also be a potential area. But again, that will come back to this board for final approval after we've put the plan together and are ready to present it.
Any questions for Mr. Hamilton? All right, Chair would entertain a motion to approve both the reserve for encumbrance and the place unexpended balance into non-lapsing account. Mr. Simmons moves. Is there a second? Ms. Harris seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? It was unanimous, thank you. All right, thanks, Tom. Sure. Item 8, approval of contract for services with State Education Resource Center, CERC. Dr. Adamowski, you want to give us the background?
Yeah, so this is the long-awaited agreement with CERC, and a fundamental part of our strategy and plan to improve and restructure for the better our special education department and its services. So you're aware that at your August meeting you approved a agreement with CREC to update its 2012 audit. That work is underway now. They are meeting with groups and parents and staff and others, and updating all of the data. We expect that report will be done in early October, and it will probably warrant a workshop meeting with the board to review these recommendations. Now, to avoid what happened in 2012, which is the fact that many of the recommendations were not implemented, we are involved currently in finding new leadership for the department and providing that new leadership with the technical assistance to implement the recommendations of the audit. So CERC's role is threefold. They will be conducting a national search. CERC, out of all of the agencies in our state, is the most connected to the special education community regionally, and has the greatest amount of expertise. In fact, before they were called CERC, State Education Resource Center, they were the State Special Education Resource Center. I know Ms. Harris is aware of their work through several intersections, and this is probably the best group that we can find in the state to help us. So they will conduct a search up to the finalist stage. As you know, you made a decision previously to upgrade this position to a chief of special services position, and on our org chart this position would be one of my direct reports, again trying to give this emphasis and importance and make it a key part of the progress of our district. CERC will then do a short-term onboarding of the new person. If it's someone from out of state, for example, Connecticut state laws, that kind of thing would be part of a short-term onboarding. But more importantly, for the rest of the year, and let's assume that we have someone on board by December. For the rest of the year, they would provide the new chief with technical assistance to implement the recommendations of the CRIC audit. And there would be a number that could be implemented immediately. Others would be like the return of several of the outside placement classes would be planned for the next school year, and they would develop with the director a plan, an accountability plan for what would happen over the next several years that could be followed. I'm going to be asking you to endorse that, approve it, so that it's absolutely clear what actions will be taken by the chief in order to achieve the recommendations of the audit. So this is for real this time, and we face a situation in special ed that needs to improve, can improve, will improve if we are committed to it. And this is a manifestation of that commitment.
Is there a motion to approve the contract? Ms. Harris moves. Is there a second? Mr. Marvis, any discussion? I will say that I'm very pleased that the way you approached CERC on this, that instead of simply using them as a search firm to find a candidate, this is a much more comprehensive process that involves onboarding the candidate, as you indicated, but also working with them for a year as they take office and get on the job to help them implement the correct recommendations. We've had a plan to correct a lot of these problems that sort of was sputteringly adopted, some parts yes, some parts no. And I think the comprehensive nature of this is exactly what we need in order to address these long-term problems. So my compliments on what you negotiated here. Any other discussion?
I agree.
All right, all in favor, please indicate. It is unanimous, thank you. All right, next item on the agenda, going into information and reports. Mr. Hamilton is the monthly financial report.
Okay, I've asked staff to provide you with what I understand is your standard report, and if you can correct me if this is not the standard report, but this is for the month of August, the period ending month of August. It's so early in the year, it's hard to really glean a whole lot of data from here, but the bottom line is, year to date, the board has spent roughly $10.9 million, or 6.4% of the total operating budget. We're 16.6% of the way through the year, so everything looks okay on its surface, certainly. We'll say, of course, the largest category of expenses being salaries, particularly for teachers. Most of the teachers are in fact paid on a 10-month schedule, so that accounts for a good portion of, we would not expect you to be at actually 16.6% at this point in the year. The year-over-year growth, this report indicates about a 4.85% growth over where we were at the same point last year. That's driven primarily by some increase in property services and also an increase in other services. I've not had a chance to do a great deal of analysis, but I do understand there's certainly been a number of expenses related to getting schools opened, and that would explain part of the variance in property services in terms of particularly those portables over at Jefferson School in particular. In the category of other services, that includes transportation, other purchase services, and special education out-of-district tuition. And again, I think we're still very early in the year. The variance over last year, although there is some variance over last year, I don't think it's a big enough number to cause any alarm at this point. But it is an area that certainly I'll be digging into deeper after I get on board. The only other point I'd make is in discussions with the superintendent, we do expect to come back with recommendations on the use of the surplus funds, and there may also be some other recommendations relative to adjustments to the budget as the team gets formed and as necessary projects come to everyone's attention. There could be some change in priorities, and that will be reflected then, if there are any change in priorities, in budget adjustments to this board. Okay?
Any questions or comments?
Yeah, is this just the result of straight line budgeting? Would you in the future be looking at more seasonally adjusting the budget so it's reflective of when we spend the money? And this isn't hard to read with a monthly comparison, but it does, like you say,
I wouldn't necessarily look to develop monthly budgets. I think that may be more complicated than necessary, but perhaps some. We have the benchmark this year to last year, which I think is a good benchmark to be able to compare where there's variances. Certainly, beyond that, I guess I'll need to kind of dig into it a little bit more to figure out whether or not we recommend any changes to the reporting format. Certainly willing to look at any options there.
I think it's clear with the monthlies, but maybe just a month to month, year-over-year variance, because this is just a year variance.
Right. I think we can probably do that, to put in month to month as well as year to date.
Tell us August this year to August last year, etc.
Yeah, I think we can do that.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, thank you, Tom. Sure. All right, next item is B, discussion of policy 6141-328, bring your own devices and protocol for use of technology in the schools. Ms. Keys.
Thank you, Mr. Lyons. Thank you, Ralph, for coming up so quick. I'll start it first, and then I'm going to switch it over to you. In policy, we've had a lot of meetings with Ralph on bring your own device, BYOD, and we did unanimously approve it during our last meeting, that we would bring it up to the regular board meeting for discussion, and then hopefully possible action, so we get moving on this quicker on October 20th. I know Ralph will be working closely with parents and students and staff to get them on board. I think our goal is really to bring us to the 21st century as far as a learning environment with BYOD. Students will have access to our district's wireless network with their own personal device that they'll bring from home. And I think the key also for our students is to be able to successfully collaborate with other students and teachers if need be.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. I'll elaborate a little bit on that. So, in general, students today, they're involved with technology 24/7. They use it to explore, to learn, to get information, and especially to be social. So those are the types of tools we want to make sure our educators have the same capacity to put into their daily instruction. Heidi mentioned one of the items that I think is one of the important items that we really want to address with the use of technology, which is collaboration, but I refer to like the 4 C's in a lot of ways of things that we want to make sure that are being addressed with all students. And those have to do with communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and creativity. And those elements, when we are put into the right environment and teachers have the right environment to use technology, can really flourish in a school system. And we've seen that happening already, especially in this last year with the Wi-Fi. As we put it into place, we're starting to see it being implemented on a daily basis, hourly basis with students. The only way we can make sure that we protect students, though, and put things into place, we do have to have policies around BYOD, which stands for Bring Your Own Device. Currently, we have 3 different models of technology integration in the district. We use computer labs or mobile carts on a regular basis. We do have a one-to-one initiative. The Norwalkl College Academy is an example of that, where each student does have their own laptop that they take back and forth to school. And the third model that we want to implement is BYOD, allowing students to bring in their own devices and into the school system. There's some benefits to, there's some definite benefits to bringing in your own pieces of equipment to the school. First of all, there's a cost factor to that. If students have the devices available to them, it's great that they can actually use them in school. It's personalized to them, so they're very familiar with it. Makes it much easier for them to use those in the classroom as well as for teachers. It means that we do have to have common platforms, though, so that work on all different devices, which is something that we're implementing quickly, and that's the use of Google is a good example of that, where the Google Classroom, Google environment actually works on any device that we use. It allows us to hopefully focus more on the teaching and learning than the specific devices that we're purchasing, by having the ability for kids to bring those in. It does bring some challenges, though, too. The same where we have the ability to bring in devices and have all these different types of devices, we have to make sure that we can manage them well and keep kids in a secure environment. We also need to make sure that we give kids the skills that they need to understand how to use their devices effectively, in school as well as out of school. We talk about 21st century learning. We're already in the 21st century for a while, so we need to make sure that we keep up on what they really need to have in place. Another challenge that can come with using bring your own device is making sure that the community understands exactly what that means and are more familiar with that. So part of what we're doing, besides, as Skis mentioned just a little while ago, we're not only going to be putting in a BYOD policy, but we will be offering some community forums that will be available, whether it's at the library, some of the schools. I'm going to be asking some of my tech coaches to do some of those too as well, so that we can inform people, not just on the BYOD policy, but more of a global term, which is called digital citizenship, making sure that students really understand what it means to use technology and the effects of that, and how parents can help monitor that and assist them in the future.
I mean, I think we spent a lot of time on policy. Artie, Shirley's not here, but going through it and kind of tweaking it and discussing it and having really just an open forum. But I think it's key to have, community involved as far as, getting the parents involved and students involved and teachers, which we know, but training, I think, is essential. So I think once we have the training set up, it would be nice for any of the forums that you have. And for Brenda, maybe we could just post it on our website when we have that set up, so everybody can know when that's going to be and take note of that.
Yeah, and we'll record a few of them too. We can stick them up on our YouTube channel so that people have them archived if they wanted to see them again.
Okay. Ms. Murray?
Could you just give me a little insight on the discussion on, we have the area of have and have-nots. What is being addressed with the students who do not have the devices?
Okay.
And to make sure there's equity there? Can you just give me a little of that?
Sure. Well, I mean, what we need to make sure is that when we actually have any instruction that goes on, that if students do not have those devices, once again, the instruction goes on in the classroom, that they have the ability to get a hold of those devices. And we've actually implemented so many Chromebooks in the district that we can make sure that students actually have the ability to have those devices. If it becomes an issue where students do not have access outside of school, we need to look at other opportunities, but we don't want to stop having a policy in place to allow students to bring in those devices, because it only expands our environment during the school day to be able to enhance what's going on.
And I would understand that, the latter portion, but really and truly, would that place a student to advantage if they had access at home and they had one, and those who didn't have to wait until they came into the classroom to access?
I don't think it put them at an advantage or a disadvantage in any way, as long as the instruction is carried out in a way that makes sense, so that they have the ability. If they don't have access at home, I mean, first and foremost, the price of technology is coming down. We need to find ways to get them more access, whether it's going to some area that does have the access for them. But we also need to make sure that our instructors, our teachers, actually know that when those issues are arising, so that we make sure that we kind of cater to that, and that students have the ability to do what they need to do within school, that they're not put at any disadvantage. But you don't want to stop the progress from moving forward, because it's really impossible to stop things moving forward with the use of technology.
And I certainly agree with that. And my concern is more on a student being not able to have the same advantages. Once they're at home, we know that our young people are on social media, and we have to, kind of pull them away from that kind of piece of it. But the fact of it is, that's the part that I'm not really convinced that if I don't have the same access and I don't have that 24/7 like the person next to me, would that, serve as a disadvantage, and that's my point. I would never want to stop moving forward because we know this is the way, you know, our children are wired that way, our students. I mean, that's just the way of the world. But I think we need to look a little closer, a little more at those who do not have access full-time.
Yeah, and we will. I mean, one of the things that kind of just was brought up to me recently that I just met with someone that's done this with the New York City school systems as well as New Orleans was looking at potential. This person happens to live in Norwalk, but does a lot of work around giving remote access to students in need that don't have that access, whether it's through a Wi-Fi access point or some other means to be able to have access at home. This is done in a lot of other districts. It was done in the past through E-rate funding. The challenge this year is that E-rate changed dramatically this past year, and all cellular service was removed from E-rate. So that's not going to be eligible anymore. I think a lot of people are going to be grasping with this and looking at more opportunities for what we call just generic Wi-Fi being available for students, because we can't give them the cellular access where they could have done that before at a very, very reduced rate. So it is a challenge. I mean, it's something that we need to make sure that we keep addressing, but we don't want to leave any kids, obviously, behind and not having the ability to be able to keep up with what's going on. But it's also important that teachers are aware of that as they do their instruction in schools and can cater and modify what they need to make sure that students have those abilities.
And if the board can keep an eye on that, and through the policy committee, I would appreciate it. Otherwise, I guess I'll have to come back around and
So I would envision two methods of access. One being through a child's provider like Verizon, or they could go through our network. Will you have like some type of VPN client that they have to install on their device?
So we actually do it directly through Wi-Fi that's filtered on the network. So they can actually, they have a, when they log on, think of it like as going to a Starbucks, where they have an ID that we give them to log on to the system. It's their client ID. It's their username that they use, that they've been using ever since they've been in 4th grade. That allows them access, and that also allows us to be able to monitor their devices that are on.
Okay, but for children could obviously go outside of that system while they're in school. Have you looked at any of the providers to see if they could dampen signal inside a building?
Yeah, it's more of a legal issue. You can't block cellular service, so it's something that we need to monitor ourselves. And that's something that you can't get away from, is the fact that there's the ability for any student to bring in a cellular device and continue to use it. It's not something that you can regulate to say that you don't want to have cellular service in a school or in any area. Which is one of the more important reasons to have a BYOD policy in place, so that you're actually covering if there's any inappropriate use. The policy is cross-referenced to our code of conduct policies, to our acceptable use policies and stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Sims?
In going through this policy, we spent a lot of time on it. One of our biggest fears was the kids getting on social media all day long. And I know one of the tests you did last year was looking at the traffic that was going through the networks at both schools. And one of the things that you found is, one school was using a lot more bandwidth, and when you got on, come to find out they were YouTube, watching videos, things like that. They have the ability to throttle down.
Yes.
Now, and that's great, but it still does not stop anyone from using their cellular service. But when they use their cellular service, they can't collaborate. They can't get onto the network, they can't work with the teacher, they can't do things like that. So we can't stop it, but yet it's still our fear that they could still play all day long. But they're going to put mechanisms in place, they're going to keep an eye on it, and throttle down a little bit where it'll deter the kids from actually doing it. But if it takes them 2 hours to upload a video, they're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So
They'll be impatient.
it was a fear. Yeah, it's something that we really considered for a long time. We struggled with it.
Yeah. And this is really a starting point. Part of the policy itself really just defines what BYOD means for the district. There are protocols that are in place beyond that, and those are things that would change over time, and that wouldn't have to come back to the board each time that there's If there's an adjustment to our Wi-Fi that we wanted to be able to add a specific protocol in there for teachers to be able to follow, we can do that. And we can do that on the, on the fly as the technology changes. So really, this BYOD policy just basically sets a framework to know that we've got something in place. We know that we're aware of that if students are going to be bringing in their own devices, there's a policy in place and they need to adhere to our district policies when they're actually in our schools.
If I could just add one other thing. Both Artie and I have high schoolers. I think we're the only ones now that have kids in high school, but, oh, you do too. Oh, you got, sorry. I don't want to be I apologize. I've only been here 6 years, sorry. But the buzz is that it's happening. My daughter came home the other day, she's like, what's up with that BYOD policy? So I think it's kids know, and they're talking about it, which I think is good. The discussion's going on.
They're the first ones to tell us when we actually have to throttle things down too. So a good example is yesterday, we're waiting for some grant funding to come in order to upgrade the networks at the secondary schools. Once that's complete, we'll be able to do a lot more without students allowing them to use their cellular phones. Yesterday, because we have a lot of district testing going on, and we were noticing that there was a dip, we can control it to the point to say only iPhones and Android phones do not connect. Everything else connects, your laptops and so forth, and that's what we did to make sure that we can actually test correctly. So it'll be a little bit up and down until we actually complete the networking piece that's going to be in place over the next couple of months. We are waiting for one last piece of the state grant to be awarded, and I think it's up for this week with the bonding commission. Once that award's made, we can actually decide to start the work. We have a vendor already provided. We've already approved the capital funds for this, and we already have our E-rate funds in place.
I mean, I think it's going to be a curve for everyone, but I think once we have it established and we have a framework, like you said, we can keep growing it. But I think the key is also each building principal. So if there's something that's inappropriate and a child's doing something that's inappropriate on their phone, hopefully the building principal can address that. Where we're not micromanaging, but they have the autonomy to look at that.
Yeah, could I suggest, there's some VPN clients that will actually slave the cellular device to that, and you'd have to disconnect before you go out and use your. Right, so then if you could supply each teacher with instantaneous report of active connections, they could look out at 20 children and say, well, they're all using them, I better see 20 active connections.
Yeah, there's a number of different ways that we can go. I mean, there's actually some new applications that are being developed that will sit on our network. One of the reasons why we paid so much for the managed Wi-Fi network that we have is so that we can actually layer some of those tools on there.
Nice.
Listening to this conversation, we're adding more responsibility to our teachers in the classroom.
But I think it's a necessity, though, considering that we're
It's
doing
no
this.
doubt,
I mean,
no
hopefully,
doubt. There's no doubt about it,
Yeah.
but just to make recognition of that.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
I mean, we're adding a piece in addition to the, curriculum and delivering and everything else, we are adding.
And the teachers that I've talked to, and especially the tech coaches that I work with, really have embraced that. One of the things, and Joe was even there at a lot of these discussions, is to make sure that in the policy and in the protocols, teachers are ultimately in charge of the way that technology is used in that classroom. So if they want to be able to say it's not being used for this period because it's not appropriate, they can do that. So, and that was one of the clear things that was made very, very apparent by the teachers, so that they know that they can control the environment and use it when it's appropriate.
I think this one, Joe, is for Bruce, because Bruce liked technology.
Bruce didn't know how to use it.
I know, I'm joking.
Bruce would have been a great student of this.
He was at every meeting for this, so I think he was for it, right?
He would have, his point was that Ralph just brought up too, is that just that idea of being able to control it, because with everything that goes on, when we just open up the floodgates, there could be that potential for too much. So adding that one little piece really takes the nerve-wracking part out for the teacher, where you can set it all up. So that was very helpful.
Thank you, Ralph. It was a hearty discussion. Thank you.
By the way, just to remind everybody, our policies require that when we're considering new policies that we discussed at one meeting and voted on a subsequent meeting, which is why we're having an open discussion here but not voting. The next item is Policy 5125, Student Records Confidentiality Directory Information. Ms. Keys.
Okay, another one that we worked on for quite a bit. Long, lengthy discussions, kind of back and forth on this, on Policy 5125. It's really an amendment to this policy. And Brenda can actually speak at any time too if she'd like. But what we're really trying to do is it's really open engagement. We're really trying to include having our parents involved in their child's education, which they are, but to also really hear about what's happening within their schools and to have our PTOs be a viable source to give information out to our parents. We had at our last meeting, we really had a broad representation of parents and PTO members. And another lively discussion on talking about, their input and what they were looking for. And many of the parents that came to our last meeting were in agreement that we really need to open this up and really get our parents involved and engaged. And a great way of doing that is for our PTOs to have access to their emails. Not to have their phone numbers, not to have their addresses, but just their emails. And we were all in agreement during our last meeting that we'd like to bring it up for discussion, which we are right now, and hopefully possible action for our next meeting, not the beginning of October, but our October 20th meeting.
Any comments or discussion? Mike?
As a PTO president, I was involved in this ages ago. There were a couple people in the audience earlier. Mr. Byrne definitely knows, and we've engaged the PTOC about this, and there's had this ridiculous system of cards. Could they not? And putting up all these hurdles. And I remember getting the DARE program, so I knew every kid that was coming into the middle school. I was PTO president, but it was so many obstacles. And the fact is, we want to engage parents, we want to communicate parents, we want the PTO to be successful. I've been to the policy committee meetings to discuss this. This makes total sense, and we need to proceed ASAP.
Okay. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we will have this on the agenda next month for a vote.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keys. Next is committee representative reports. Let's see. Mike?
What?
Negotiations.
Oh, well, it's not the same without our old friend Bruce Mellion in the audience.
Right
who
over
always
there.
wanted me to say less rather than more. But we, as everyone knows, we are in the process of negotiating a new contract with the National Federation of Teachers. And we did negotiate this summer. We did go into mediation. Arbitration was triggered on September 8th. We had not concluded, we had not come to an agreement on everything, so we have gone into arbitration. And we have another meeting scheduled for Friday, excuse me, 1 second, I can't remember the date off the top of my head. But,
second week in October or something?
Yeah, it's Friday, Friday, October 9th. So will be our next arbitration meeting. So we're moving along, we're making progress, but we're not there yet.
Okay. Ms. Keys, you've been busy tonight. Anything else on your docket?
Oh, gosh, am I back? I'm sorry. It's funny, actually, Mr. Barbas mentioned, can't we just get this through, like this last policy we discussed, but as Mr. Lyons mentioned, it has to go through the discussion stage, and the following meeting will be action, and then we can move through in those two policies this evening.
Did we just have discussion?
We just did, but it has to be for the following meeting for an action item.
Right.
Just Robert's rules, right? It's just how it is. But tonight, we actually had planned to have a policy meeting prior to this meeting tonight. Bruce Morris was supposed to be present. He couldn't make it, unfortunately. But he will definitely, I have his approval. He is definitely coming to our next meeting. We will devote our full hour to bullying. That's why the person that spoke earlier, Ms. Keegan, I would like to get her involved. But we're going to have an update, a full update on what's going on in our schools as far as bullying.
Okay. Mr. Kusimis, any reports? No. Okay. Ms. Murray?
It's the Finance Committee. First, I'd like to thank the Finance Committee members and Mr. Hamilton, who had his first meeting, and I was unable to attend because I had a death in the family. But they forged through, and I'd just like to thank them for doing that and moving forward. And also to the board members who acknowledged and sent condolences to myself and my family. Our next finance meeting will be October 14th.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Are there any board member announcements? Mr. Kusimis?
Well, it's not an announcement, but I do want to throw this out on the table. I know it's going to open up a can of worms. Just to start a conversation, in the paper the last week, or I think it was last week, there are, I guess, scheduled 2 big apartment units, 700 apartment units over at Merit 7, another 200 over at Wall Street. I don't know what that's going to do to us for a school. I mean, we're already behind. I think it's something we need to start sitting down with the city and having a conversation over which way the city is growing and what we're going to do, working along with the city and the developers to be able to provide schools for them. So I'm just going to throw it out there. I'm sure everybody's thinking about it, but we need to talk about it.
I will mention that you know, it has been a topic of conversation about how much communication is happening between the planning and zoning offices and the school system, and not much of that communication has trickled up to the level of the superintendent of the board. But I did exchange some emails today with Mike Green, as the director of planning and zoning, on this topic. And interestingly, he forwarded me a series of emails that he exchanges he had with Manny Rivera, talking in some detail about projects that were underway in the city and bringing it to the attention of Manny. I think part of what may have motivated Manny to push for the facilities study may have been those communications. He also forwarded me a set of other emails, which I just got them this afternoon, so I'll share them with the board. The staff of Planning and Zoning apparently has had extensive communication with our consultants who are doing the facility study. There's been a good deal of two-way communication. Now again, you know, that was not visible to any of us. I only found out about it today when I made the inquiries. So I think steps have been taken to open communications there. Clearly, it's been a lack for many years in this city. But I just wanted to share that with everybody because I just became aware of these communications this afternoon when they were forwarded over by Mr. Green, that there is a back and forth going on. I know Dr. Adamowski, upon learning of the development at my old U.S. surgical site, has also you know, made sure that our facilities people make sure that is part of those communications between zoning and the consultants who are doing the facility study. So I think there are steps that have started. I think that clearly when those communications are happening, I know Dr. Adamowski had no visibility into these either, but we would certainly want staff, when they have communications like this, to bring us up to speed on it, because otherwise we feel like we're flying blind here, and we're facing crowded schools, and every time you turn around, somebody's building 1,000 new apartments. I don't know whether Connecticut state statutes allow exactions from developers for things like schools. Other states do. You know, Florida does that routinely. If you build so many units of housing, you have to pay for a school. I'm not sure Connecticut is there yet, so I don't know to what extent, you know, that kind of imposition can be made. But certainly, much better communication there, and should allow two-way feedback. You know, I know, for instance, when the public hearings happen on these big housing projects, we never have anybody there speaking on behalf of the schools. Maybe we should.
Good point.
You know, maybe our facilities director, or even the superintendent, or me as chairman of the board, should go to these public hearings and say, by the way, when you build all these units, here's the schools that are going to be impacted by them. Here's how many kids we have in the schools. Here's what the capacity is. If X number of students come out of this development, we're going to have to do an expansion of the school building, or we're going to have to add portables. And so zoning commission, when you're thinking about this project, and you know, there are aspects of discretion that they have and they don't. If somebody comes in with an application for something that is absolutely permitted by the zoning regulations, they get the permit. Doesn't matter what we think or anybody else does. That's how the state statutes work on zoning. But if they're coming in for special permits, for zoning changes, for you know, reviews where the zoning commission has some discretion, particularly when they're asked to change the zoning regulations where the commission has a lot of discretion, I think we got to make sure that not just at staff-to-staff level, but maybe commission-to-commission level, we improve the level of communication on these things. So I just want to let everybody know, there has been a start between the facilities study and the zoning commission, but there's a lot of room for improvement there. Mike? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you didn't see her. I just want to say, that's great. I'm glad this has started. It's high time it did start. But I think, and Artie probably is going to agree with me, I would assume, that, there's a cost to us, and no one's paying us. So just like Avalon Norton was built, and we had to get a new school route, bus route, that cost us $85,000. The city never gave us an extra $85,000. We had to take that money that we might have paid for intervention aids or something to fund the bus. So I think the fundamental discussion has got to change, especially with all this crazy development. I mean, it's like out of control now. And every day you open the paper, there's another 200-unit apartment. And I love this mom I met who works for redevelopment. She's like, oh, they're so small, they don't have any kids. I'm like, yeah, right. Let's go through each one of these projects, except for Ironworks. All those projects have added kids. Correct.
And that was an interesting thing. One of the emails that I got from Mike Green today specifically said that. He said that the models that people have been using for how many students are going to be generated from these kinds of housing units are out of date.
They're flawed.
And so they're making projections based on condos that were built in the 80s or 90s, which really were kid-free.
Yeah.
And bringing them forward here, where it's not that uncommon to get.
But I think we definitely have to alter that dialogue, especially it's an election year, that there has got to be a change. So it's like, you want to approve these city and you're going to get X tax dollars, well, you're going to have to give us some of this money to fund, and it's got to be more of a Florida type arrangement, or I don't know how we structure it, but it can't, this information, I'm great, it's about time that we started having this exchange of information, but we need to go that next step pretty darn quickly, because otherwise we're going to be screwed.
Yeah. Well, I think, when the facility study comes out, because it is factoring in this information, that may be a real eye-opener, much more for the city than for us. The city made big capital investments in schools back in the 90s and early 2000s. The Bryan McMahon was completely rebuilt, and a bunch of other big projects were carried out. Since then, we've scaled back to a project at Narragansett here, and then Boyd here, and then maybe in 2 years Jefferson, and that makes sense in an environment of stasis. And a lot of school systems are having reductions in student populations now. Norwalk is sort of an anomaly here, where student population is going up. And if the developers in Norwalk have decided we're not building any more industry here, we're not building any more office buildings, so we're just going to fill every square inch of this city with apartments, then the city's master planners have to decide, well, okay, if we're going to let them build thousands of new apartments all over the city, then we got to build a long-term capital budget plan that plans on adding several schools. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is to say, we don't have the capacity for this, we got to scale down the size of these projects. And I think our facility study, when it shows, expected impacts on the schools, that all of our friends on the Common Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission need to get copies of that study, so they can start thinking about what are the long-term consequences of allowing this magnitude of development. Excellent point. Thanks.
It is, very much so, and I agree. And I also like to, the board keeps in mind that that there's no pushback on the existing schools and the crisis that we already have in the situation, because sometimes we find that happens, and then the priority kind of pushed in the back, and we forget that we are already dealing with portables at Jefferson and a number of other things. So there might be a number of things that we might have to do to adjust with drawing of lines and all those type of things. But the fact of it is, I just don't want to see that the schools that we have waiting in line get pushed back because of these other issues that are coming up.
I agree. Maybe build a school on Clover Ave and stuff.
We'd have to give them all the property. Tom, you can come up with the capital money for that, right?
I could before, maybe.
Back in the good old days.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you just missed that opportunity, right?
All right, good, very, very good discussion. Thank you for bringing that up. And I will, I'll compile those emails and share them with the board so you can see the communications that are underway.
Thank you. That's good.
All right, next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of September 1, 2015. Chair would entertain a motion to approve. Mr. Simmons, is there a second? Ms. Keys, seconds. Any changes, corrections? Did not see any myself. All right, hearing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes, please indicate. Ms. Harris, yes, no?
I wasn't.
Okay. All opposed? Abstentions? Abstention, Ms. Harris, very good. Motion is approved. All right, and that leaves the executive session. The chair would make a motion to go into, or entertain a motion to go into executive session for discussion of employment of identifiable personnel. Mr. Simmons moves. Is there a second? Mr. Meeks seconds. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries unanimously, and we'll have a 5-minute recess and then commence the executive session.